We can't talk about happiness and well-being in the workplace without talking about creating the conditions from which the state of happiness and well-being will emerge. And the fundamental building block of creating the conditions that foster happiness and well-being in the workplace is psychological safety. Now, psychological safety predicts not only well-being and promotes well-being, but it predicts performance in high-performing teams. So let's talk about what this is. Let's unpack it a bit. Psychological safety is this interpersonal climate where people feel like it's safe to take risks, to be vulnerable. And what I'm talking about with vulnerability is being able to admit mistakes and having the belief that if you do, you're not going to be thrown under the bus, that you instead are going to be embraced and you're going to be able to correct that mistake, where the sort of minor flubs that are going to happen as we go around our work, that those are accepted and they're not a big deal. Vulnerability, like raising your hand and say, I don't know, I'll figure this out. And so if we think of the opposite of psychological safety, creates a tremendous amount of stress. When you're anxious, stressed, hypervigilant, needing to cover yourself and cover your path, because if you don't, there's going to be a severe consequence. That is one of the greatest sources of stress and anxiety, and then burnout in the workplace. Most people understand and can feel, they sense what a general condition of psychological safety is. The thing is, most leaders get psychological safety wrong. They think that psychological safety is being nice. It's creating harmony and making everyone feel good, wearing kids' gloves, sugarcoating feedback. But that's wrong. Psychological safety is not about being nice. It's the answer to an evolutionary-based question. And this question is, are you with me or against me? It turns out the answer to that question is going to lead to a host of very natural behaviors, either protective, defensive behaviors, or risk-taking, responsibility-taking behaviors. Risk-taking, like doing A/B experiments, trying something new, bringing up an opposing idea, or going against the status quo. Doing learning experiments where we learn from the mistakes, try things that we're not sure if they're going to work, but there's a reasonable belief, evidence that they might. These are the type of behaviors that drive innovation and make the workplace exciting, vibrant, and a place where we all want to bring our best, because we know that we will have that sort of freedom, autonomy of thought, of diversity of thought, where diversity of thought is embraced and encouraged. That's the sort of workplace that can solve the complex interdependent problems that we face in our modern day global environment. So the question is, how do we create that? I call it the 4 C's. How do we create an environment of psychological safety? The first C is choice. Choice is the intentional, deliberate action where we see that there's, just like Viktor Frankl said, there's a stimulus and a response, and in that space, we have the power to choose our response. And so it's making an intentional choice to respond rather than react, to have the self-awareness of when we're triggered, to have the self-awareness not only of when we're triggered, but also of strengths and what we need when we're slipping towards burnout, or when we are engaged in an activity that's very exciting and interesting. It starts with choice. The second C is care. Care is creating this human-focused workplace. It's relating human to human with empathy, where we take another's perspective and the ideas and understand where they're coming from, where we strive to understand rather than to be understood, where we show interest in the person behind the role or the ideas that are driving a position. So this is a very human-focused environment through which people can then feel like they can bring their best. The third C is courage. Courage is about being honest. It's about having the wherewithal to stop and say, I made a mistake and I will correct it. It's standing tall in your vulnerability because it's vulnerable to make a mistake, right? And to admit fallibility. So admitting fallibility, not in adopting a sort of collapsing and stance or letting go of the helm and say, I don't know, and letting the ship toss at sea, but instead it is standing tall and having the courage to admit and be honest with the very human aspect of our complex interdependent workplace. So it takes, this takes a tremendous amount of bravery to come into the workplace and to admit mistakes, to reframe mistakes, not just as a failure of something to be avoided, but instead as interesting feedback, just like success is interesting feedback. The fourth C in creating psychological safety is co-elevate. Co-elevate is this, we are stronger together. It takes a village. No longer are the days when any one person has the answer. A leader's job is to create the conditions where people can bring their best, to get out of their way, to equip them with the resources, knowledge, systems that they need to perform at their best in their job, to create the solutions that have never been created before. This is the type of workplace where people can leverage their strengths, where they're seen at their best with recognition, appreciation. They feel that they have not only a seat at the table, but a voice in the conversation. Co-elevating is the leader that not only knows that they can rise to the top because they're a player, but they have the capacity to bring others up with them. That is a true leader. As Simon Sinek said, there's no such thing as true leadership. You either are a leader or are not a leader. Because a leader is someone who people follow. We follow our leaders because we believe in their vision, we believe in their character, we believe in them as a person. We have an emotional connection to their ideas and to their methods. So it's a very personal relationship, actually. Otherwise, you're an authoritarian figure. Otherwise, you're a people mover. But what we need are to have those leaders that can elevate everyone up to their best. When we can create the conditions of psychological safety with what I call these 4 C's, choice, care, courage, and co-elevate, then we can create these workplaces where innovation happens, where we dare to discover new solutions that have never in human history existed before, and maybe even dream up ways to elevate all of humanity to the unimaginable.